Picturesque mountains, heavenly beaches, rare animal species, amazing architecture, and rich history. The poorest slums, long-term civil wars, major drug trafficking, and the gap between rich and poor. And all this is about her. About Colombia. Colombians consider their country the most beautiful in the world. And here there really is something to catch the eye. The largest cities of Bogotá, Cali, and Medellín boast a location within forested mountains, while Cartagena and Barranquilla boast views of the Caribbean Sea. Cano Cristals, the Crystal River, or as the locals call it, the River of Five Colors, is considered one of the most beautiful in the world. It combines yellow, blue, green, black, and red shades. And the reason for such a riot of colors is blooming algae. And this is Ciudad Perdida, or the Lost City, which is hidden in the jungle in northern Colombia. It was founded by Indians in ancient times, and unjustifiably deprived of attention. Tourists usually look at Machu Picchu. A 2-hour drive from Medellín is the beautiful town of Guatapé. In the entire city you will not find two identical houses, each painted in its own unique style, including the administration building. Even the local transport, tuk-tuk and used to transport tourists, are covered in bright patterns. Near the city is the rock El Peñón de Guatapé, which was once an object of worship of the Indians. This 220-meter high rock can be climbed using a ladder. You really have to work hard, because there seem to be 740 steps. The incredible beauty of the nature of Colombia is filled with exotic species of animals, four-toed anteater, Andean bear, cox of the rock, Amazonian river dolphin, butterfly 89-18, red-winged chachalaca, terrible leaf climber, giant arapaima, scarlet ibis, horned screamer. You won't see many animals here. Various species of hummingbirds are found even in megacities. A distinctive feature of Colombia is coffee, which is also the main agricultural crop. The local climate is ideal for growing an invigorating drink. The volcanic soil is fertile, the sun is soft and does not burn the fruits and leaves of the coffee trees. As a result, the beans ripen evenly, and the coffee turns out rich with a pronounced aroma. Unlike Brazil, where huge coffee plantations are cultivated by cars, unripe beans can get in, which gives a bitter taste. In Colombia, harvesting is done by hand as the grains ripen. Therefore, Colombian coffee is valued for its excellent quality and is considered the most expensive in the world. For the country, coffee exports are a significant part of national income. Created back in 1927, the Federation of Colombian Coffee Producers prohibits the export of beans under the coffee brand from Colombia and does not carry out quality control. If the check is passed, then the packaging is marked with this trademark with the image of the fictional farmer Juan Valdez, who is a collective image of a typical coffee farmer from Colombia. One of the symbols of the capital of Bogotá, the memory of Miguel Simón Bolívar, the legendary general who brought Colombia independence from the Spanish Empire. In addition to Colombia, the general liberated most of South America, becoming national heroes of Venezuela, Peru, and Ecuador. Bogotá, like all cities in Colombia, is divided into zones from 1 to 6. Accordingly, from the poorest to the richest. In the first zone, people live in slums very poorly, but they are exempt from taxes and utility bills. Prices in stores are the lowest in the city. The further the zone number, the higher the standard of living, but also the higher the taxes, prices, and utility bills. Thus, residents of rich zones pay for life in poor ones. Peculiar Colombian socialism. As they say here, the higher you go in the mountains, the worse life is. Slums arose spontaneously, for the most part, they were all spontaneous construction. On the mountain slopes in cities, land costs less, so slums grew there. In the center of the rich there is a very instructive law for any city in the world. If the owner of a building maintains its historical appearance, does not disfigure the facade with white double-glazed windows, or does not babble advertising, then he is completely exempt from taxes. It is interesting that Medellín, the second major city in Colombia, has a metro, but the capital does not have a subway. The main type of public transport there is buses, for which special platforms have been built. But in Medellin the metro is located below. They decided to connect the slums on the mountain slopes to the center with a cable car, from which, if desired, a tourist can see what the slums looked like without risking his life. Indians and Spanish conquistadors and black slaves proved to have a significant influence on the culture of Colombia, including painting, literature, and music. Colombians do not like European music. Most often they play something local on the streets or in clubs: salsa, cumbia, vallenata. The most popular music among young people is reggaeton, something like Latin American hip-hop. Reggaeton in Colombia sounds from literally every iron. The lyrics and songs are often very frank and filled with profanity. Cali, the third largest city, is called the world capital of the salsa, the most popular Latin American dance. Salsa means hot sauce. This fiery, sultry Latin American dance can be watched and listened to in numerous salsa teak halls that are scattered throughout the city. Local cuisine is very diverse. There is a huge amount of fruit: mango, papaya, guava, lula, granadilla, pineapple, blackberry, curaba, and many others. Lots of unusual street food. For example, arepas, flatbread with cheese. The body contains empanadas, pies with different fillings. Or here's sheikh heron, pigskin chips. And also the local carcinogen, wild fried sausages, meat, and chicken are sold everywhere. In 2023, one of the most famous Colombian artists, Fernando Botero, died. His unusual style of painting everything and everyone as fat became known as botherism. And Fernando said in his work that there must be many good people. And he added with a sad smile, well, bad too. This is how Botero saw the Mona Lisa. This picture is called a fight. Even the guitar did not escape rounding. This is how Botero saw himself. He was not only an artist, but also a sculptor. Colombia is the world leader in emerald exports, with 80% of the market. The real revolution in emerald mining began only in the 70s of the last century, when private individuals took up the development of the birthplace. However, due to their value and demand abroad, Colombian emeralds have created a huge illegal trade niche. Until now, a continuous flow of millions of dollars is lining the pockets of criminal gangs. While the fight against the illicit trade in emeralds remains a pressing issue in Colombia, another important criminal area is already spreading throughout the world. This is cyber fraud. In the digital age, where data becomes increasingly valuable, the importance of information security professionals grows every day. We are talking about white hat hackers. They protect our data and the data of corporations. They hack and look for vulnerabilities of sites, services, applications so that scammers do not get to them and work on the side of good. But emeralds, small stones in a criminal crown. Everyone knows about a real diamond and its name is cocaine. And of course it would be stupid not to remember about the one whose middle name is King Cocaine, but Pablo Escobar. In the late 80s, he controlled 80% of the cocaine sold worldwide. He owned a fortune of $30 billion. In 1989, Escobar became so carried away by his criminal career that he ended up in 7th place in Forbes magazine's ranking, and dropped out only after his death. Pablo grew up in a poor family near Medellin. In this city, he formed his first gang, which made a living by stealing cars. Then there was racketeering and even kidnapping. By the age of 22, Escobar had gained fame as the largest crime boss in Medellin, and it was then that he first began selling cocaine. Quite quickly, Pablo strengthened his position in the first position in the cocaine industry in Colombia, and then throughout South America. Every shipment of cocaine that you transported from Colombia was under the control of the drug lord. He imposed a special tax on all deliveries, but also guaranteed their delivery. Flying over Colombia in a plane, you would think that it was almost entirely covered with dense, untouched jungle. But it was in them that Pablo hid his laboratories for the production of white matter. In 1977, Escobar became the founder of the Medellin cartel, which existed for a total of 17 years. The cartel was guided by a simple principle: pay or die. If you thought that how could such a small country as Colombia consume so much cocaine, then you are mistaken. The main buyer was not in Colombia, or even in the countries of South America. Most of the exports went to the United States. It was there that at Miami Beach parties, wealthy Americans increased their dollar and Pablo Escobar's account. But for the time being, the US government turned a blind eye to this problem. The time came when Escobar's connections with the Panamanian dictator Manuel Nerga were revealed. Nerga's personality fits perfectly with the catchphrase of sitting on two chairs, but in Manuel's case there were many more chairs. In the 60s, he collaborated with the CIA, becoming the main supplier of information on South America, as well as an illegal supplier of weapons to fight the Red Partisans. Then he saw great benefits in becoming Escobar's friend and helping him supply cocaine. He did not ignore the Cuban communists, who became the trigger. When the connections between Escobar and Nerga were revealed, the drug lord was finally noticed in the United States. Apparently, this was the only reason that interested Ronald Reagan, who always talked about the Red Menace. In his speech, he announced the launch of a social campaign against drugs called Just Say No. Since then, the states have begun to contribute in every possible way to the capture of Colombian drug lords, sponsoring Colombian special forces and sending their own anti-drug agents. But taking Escobar was not easy. He owned 30 estates and a whole network of informants who warned about the approaching threat. In his native Medellin, Pablo received widespread support from the local poor from the slums, of which there were plenty in the city. Using dirty cocaine money, he built houses for the poor without asking for anything in return. Pablo also built many football fields, since he himself was a big football fan. He even became a sponsor of the athletics national team and saw the team as an additional way to launder money. Posing himself as a Colombian Robin Hood, Escobar set his sights higher than any other drug lord in the world. He seriously decided to become president of Colombia. Pablo knew that the poor, to whom he literally gave money, built housing, schools, and hospitals, would support him in his political ambitions. In 1982, the Colombian government signed an extradition treaty with the United States, deporting captured drug lords to an American prison. Pablo said exactly that: "I would rather lie in a grave in Colombia than sit in prison in the USA." He suggested that the government repeal the law, promising replacements and pay off the entire external debt of the country. A measly $10 billion, but was refused. There was nothing left but to act using political methods. In the same year 1982, Escobar triumphantly entered the Colombian Congress. At the age of 32, he became a substitute congressman, that is, he received the right to vote in the absence of a deputy. Cocaine money, popularity among the people and connections at the top did their job. The farmer's son has his sights set on the presidency. But even in Colombia itself there were people capable of resisting the drug lord. Minister of Justice Rodrigo Lara Bonilla launched a campaign against Escobar and ensured that Pablo was expelled from Congress in disgrace. Escobar's political career was broken forever, and the presidency had to be forgotten. He does not like to lose and, accustomed to acting with bloody methods, Escobar responded with terror. His people shot Bonilla. Special groups nicknamed Los Extraditables dealt with officials, journalists, and police officers throughout the country. Escobar even made contact with left-wing guerrillas, ensuring they captured the Palace of Justice in the capital. Tanks were brought into the city, and as a result of the bloodbath, about 100 people died, including 11 of the most intractable judges. And in the fire that happened, all the documents for the extradition of members of the Medellin cartel were miraculously burned. The war declared by the cartel government lasted 9 years. Members of the Colombian secret police, one after another, eliminated or arrested Escobar's closest associates. In response, the bandits carried out terrorist attack after terrorist attack. Dozens of people were killed every day at the hands of cartel militants across the country. Car bombings were a special feature of the cartel. In August 1989, killers shot the candidates of President Luis Carlos Golan, who promised to end the cocaine trade. And in November, Escobar's people committed a terrible terrorist attack. A passenger plane on which the future president of Cesar, Gaviria Trujillo, was supposed to fly, was blown up in the air. All 110 people on board were killed, but Trujillo was not among them. Colombian Robin Hood became a terrorist. In 1990, then President Trujillo invited the drug lords to surrender, promising not to extradite them to the United States. By that time, Escobar began to realize that he was losing the war. The army and intelligence services, rival drug cartels, CIA operatives, and far-right militants united against him. Relatives of those killed at the hands of his bandits created the Los Paps organization, the Death Squad, which killed everyone associated with Escobar. Pablo himself was hunted by a special search group, which selected the best of the best from the army and police. And Pablo Escobar gave up. But, of course, not like an ordinary mortal. Don Pablo agreed to plead guilty to several minor crimes and go to prison for 5 years on the condition that he be forgiven for his past sins, as well as with one more small but very important caveat. He will serve his sentence in a prison built by himself. A huge complex called La Catedral, located in the mountains not far from the native medallion, looked more like a luxurious estate, with a bar, disco, swimming pool, saunas, and a football field. Escobar could receive any visitors he wanted, and he himself left the walls of the La Catedral when he wanted and as much as he wanted. The jailers were mainly engaged in protecting Escobar from those who wanted to deal with him. From prison, Pablo ran his cocaine empire, gave orders for reprisals against competitors, and even executed some himself. A year later, the government's patience ran out and President Rachel ordered Escobar to be removed from La Catedral and put in a real cell. But Escobar was warned in time, and he again eluded real justice. However, this did not last long. The enraged government used all means to get the drug lord. In December 1993, intelligence services detected a call from Escobar to his son and located the location of the fugitive cartel leader. The house where he was hiding was surrounded by special forces. Pablo Escobar fired back, then tried to escape through the roof, but was killed by a sniper. The epoch-making event did not spare Fernanda Batera either. 25,000 people gathered for Pablo Escobar's funeral. Someone mourned the Colombian Robin Hood, for whom popular rumor created the fame of a kind-hearted fighter against the oligarchs. Someone came to say goodbye to the former boss, who was responsible for about 4,000 lives. Many say that as much as Escobar vehemently hated the Colombian government and terrorized ordinary civilians, he just as fiercely loved his family. Just one detail. When the war between the drug lord and the government was already coming to an end and the Pablo family rushed from one house to another to hide, at one moment they found themselves in a house where there was a fireplace, but no firewood, and it was already cold outside. Without thinking, Escobar threw $2 million into the fireplace and set it on fire. The drug cartel family paid a heavy price for the crime of the head of the family. The wife remained a widow, and their 2 children lost their loving father, aged 14 and 9 years. They are still paying the price of powerful emotional baggage and constant threats from people who directly or indirectly suffered at the hands of the notorious drug lord. In addition, they lost all the money, which was confiscated and handed over to the Colombian authorities. Pablo's son Sebastian denied and simply did not want to believe that his father died from a sniper's bullet. He claimed that Escobar committed suicide after finding himself in a hopeless situation. The drug problem now remains one of the main problems for Colombia. It is better not to joke with Colombians on this topic, it will offend them. In the 80s, when Escobar's drug empire was at the peak of its power, he literally did not know what to do with the money. One of his third-party, non-cocaine projects was his personal zoo. Along with the drug lord on Willy Hacienda Napoles, there lived giraffes, rhinoceroses, antelopes, an elephant, and a pony. And 4 huge hippopotamuses lived here. When the hacienda was captured by government forces in 1993, the animals were caught and sent to legal parks. Everyone except the hippopotamuses. These gave more resistance than Escobar's mercenaries, for which the hippos were nicknamed cocaine. They didn't catch them, it was more expensive for themselves. They were simply released into the local jungle. Now hippos have multiplied, populated the floodplain of the Magdalena River and are expanding their range. They literally occupied reservoirs along the river. This is already a potential environmental threat. Hippos began to displace native species. The Vamontina otter has already left its usual habitats. To complicate matters, hippos are territorially selfish animals, and scientifically speaking, natural-born ecosystem engineers. They are like bobrians, they influence the surrounding nature quite radically. Hippos feed on land and defecate in the water, thereby moving nutrients from the banks into rivers and ponds. Shortage in one place, overflow in another. The chemical composition of reservoirs changes, they quickly become overgrown with greenery and turn into swampy slurry. Fish there, as you might guess, die out or are replaced by other species. And hippos with their carcasses, like excavators, dig trenches and entire canals. In general, they establish their own order, and all this in the absence of predators. What to do with 50 living excavators? Don't clear. The government for some time thought about simply catching them one at a time and sterilizing them. However, it took about $25,000 and a lot of human effort to capture just one small chrome baby hippopotamus. It's too expensive, complicated, and pointless, it's easier to just be patient. In addition, hippos are gradually disappearing in Africa, and Colombia can become a saving alternative and reserve for them. This is how Pablo Escobar became perhaps the most unobvious reason for the appearance of an invasive species in Colombia. Another bloody page in the history of Colombia was opened in 1948. Then an armed conflict began, the cause of which was the confrontation between the liberal and conservative parties. This period went down in history under the name La Violencia and lasted 10 years. In the Escobar story, we mentioned radical paramilitary groups several times. Do you think they are a thing of the past? No matter how it is. One of the most famous FARC, from the Spanish Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, is still functioning and waging its struggle. It consists of up to 20,000 people. It was formed in 1964 as the military wing of the country's Communist Party. Members of the FARC fought with arms in their hands to create a state of social justice and social equality. The group received money for its activities in an interesting way. In 1982, at a partisan conference, the FARC came up with the idea of levying a revolutionary tax on large cocaine producers. The Colombians called them narco-guerrillas. The rebels used terrorist attacks on police stations and kidnappings as a tool to put pressure on the authorities. At one time, he managed to take hostage even presidential candidates Ingrid Betancourt. In general, the methods are not very different from Pablo Escobar. Government troops regularly attempted to clear the jungle of guerrillas, and both heavy artillery and bombers were used in military operations. However, the rebels still control about 20% of Colombia. Since 1964, more than 220,000 Colombians have died in ongoing conflicts, many of them civilians. It was only in 2016 that the government signed a peace agreement with the leadership of the rebel movement in Cuban Harbor. As you understand, Colombia is a colorful country with stunning nature, interesting history, and sometimes very cruel. What future awaits this country? Will Colombians be able to throw off the heavy burden of drug trafficking and civil wars from their shoulders? Time will show.